Hey guys, it's Jamie here. Hope you're enjoying the Car Ride Home podcast. This was something special that we at the Alliance Fastpitch thought that could really help. Could help coaches, athletes, or maybe it's just fun to hear a story here and there. Please be sure to subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube and leave us a review. And if you have any special requests of people that inside of softball that you want to hear from, shoot us a message, info@thealliancefastpitch.com. We'd love to hear from you.
All right, back for another episode, and I am super excited to talk with Jamie today about specifically PAC, which we'll get into, and sort of a new initiative and a new program she's starting through the Alliance, which is really exciting. But maybe, Jamie, first just tell everyone sort of a little bit of your background, how you ended up where you are today, and then we can go from there.
Well, thanks for having me first. I guess I'll try to make it short and kind of get to the point too of how it leads into Alliance and into PAC. But I'm Jamie Lobpries. I'm born and raised in a small town in Texas, which I think is a lot of my foundation and roots. I played every sport imaginable except softball, which is kind of funny until like the very end. But finally got into I was actually a really competitive soccer player, which introduced me to the college world. Got into softball, played at Texas A&M. After that, I was pretty fortunate to play in the National Pro Fastpitch League, and I think that one expanded my network big time, but also opened my eyes to perhaps a lot of the problems and issues. And I'm a problem solver, so it's like, all right, what can I do? Went back to school, got my PhD, thought I was going academia, didn't stay in that very long. Spent 5 years after I taught at University of Tampa. I spent 5 years at USSSA and eventually was running their national fast pitch program and working at the youth level. And that's where I got to meet so many of the club directors and youth coaches. And I think the people that are just really, really passionate about softball and about the athletes. And that led us, honestly, to the creation and formation of the Alliance Fastpitch. So here I am today.
Yeah.
So make it really quick.
Yes, that was pretty good. Maybe just like a couple highlights of not the whole, it doesn't have to be the whole story, but a little bit of like what are some of the specific foundations of the Alliance, or what are some things that you guys maybe identified that you really wanted to try to solve or work towards solving in the youth game particularly?
I think the real story of how the Alliance started was in the summer of 2019. And there were four individuals who got together during the Colorado tournament. And it was Mike Stith, Tony Rico, Scott Smith, and Greg Schnudi. And those four run pretty large programs. And they were getting a lot of preferential treatment that we see at the top teams. But a lot of teams inside their own organizations weren't. And they started recognizing just some of the different inequities. So Mike Stith and I had built a pretty good relationship and friendship. He called me and went on this mission of how can we better serve our youth players. And I think the biggest thing we noticed too is everybody operates in silos, and it's a very fragmented youth softball world. So it's like, what if we just all started working together? And those were honestly the first conversations. Number one was putting the athlete first. I think that's our biggest pillar, which we'll probably talk a lot about. And the other is collaboration. And I think we're hoping to be an example inside the larger world of softball that, hey, if you actually work together off the field, we can make really, really special things happen for the athletes. And we can combine our resources and actually make, more accessible, more affordable, and just help each other and help the families.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I, have the privilege of being a little involved with the formation of PAC, and so maybe just very briefly, what is it? And then we could get into sort of like how it was formed and the reasonings. But let's start with that.
Okay, it is not the pack, right? Like the Pac-12. I don't know, like
Yeah.
you think of the Bruin bubble and all the pack, but pack is our version, player advisory committee, and it's something that when I was an athlete at Texas A&M, I was involved with the student athlete advisory committee, and I thought it was really powerful to have a voice as an athlete, and I used to talk with our athletic director and our administration, and we're a company as the Alliance, and in our mission statement, it says, we're about the athlete and putting the athlete first. Well, if we look in the mirror, we better give her a voice, and she better have a seat at the table. And so it's kind of been something we've been working on in the background, and got together, yourself and several former players who are now back in the youth game, and throughout this concept of what if we started our own advisory committee of athletes, and we work with juniors and seniors. And so that led to the Alliance Fastpitch Player Advisory Committee, the PAC.
Yeah, I think I know this was sort of forming in your head, and then you and I were talking about a little bit, but I often think, even in our business at S2, we'll get asked a lot, you're thinking of marketing or the way you approach things. And, at the end of the day, it's a weird space when your client is a lot of times the adult, but who you're serving is the athlete and children, teenagers.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's important ways that we can start to give them seats at the table. And I think this is a really good start to that. It's been fun to be a part of. So maybe walk through. So this is the first year, sort of vision for this year of the group. How did people sort of get picked for it, apply for it? What did that process look like?
I think it starts back in December, and I think it might have been your idea, Krista, of like, why don't we bring on? We're trying to make decisions, like you said, for athletes. So why don't we bring a couple on and just get their feedback? So we had our first kind of focus group with some high school athletes in December, and I was fired up because it seemed like they were excited, they were passionate about it, which it validated that idea. And so then we opened up applications in February, and then that's when I realized, like, okay, it's for juniors and seniors. Seniors are going to be done pretty quickly. But we opened up the applications. We also had where coaches could nominate their players, and didn't know how it was going to go. And I'm sitting here watching like all the applications come in, and there were none in the first week. I'm like, shoot, maybe like timing is wrong. And so then, like, all right, let's extend it. They're all busy, right? And we're fortunate with the Alliance that we have access to a lot of the coaches and pushing it through them. And by the end of it, we had 19 applications from juniors and seniors, and I just thought that was incredible. Like, I was more fired up about that, and I also realized how difficult I made the application process. Like, dang, these
Yeah.
questions are kind of brutal,
Yeah.
or they're long, right? And you could tell that these girls took a lot of time on them. And I started reading the responses, and it was like I have chills thinking about the responses from those 19 athletes. I'll never forget it. And talk about validating that not only is it the right thing to do to give them a voice, but man, their voice is powerful. So I was already excited just of going through the applications. And I think the mix was 10 juniors, 9 seniors in high school that applied. And at that point, it's like, you know what? You did this and you want to be a part of the foundation. So we want all of them to be a part of it. So kind of the backstory of how it all launched there.
Yeah. I think it's so on this week, Ashley and I went to a business conference, and Andy Dunn, who is the founder of Bonobos Pants, it's a long story, but he was the panelist, and he just wrote a book, and it's actually about his mental health journey. It really has nothing in some ways to do with business, but a question that one of the audience members asked him was, how do you help educate Gen Z about mental health? And he started laughing, and he said, they don't need educated on it. This generation is like more aware, more educated about so many things than any of us have ever been. They need resources. They need the ability to have a platform. And I think as we've been going through this process, and I've seen the application, and I think we can get into sort of a little bit of the first meeting, that's been so clear to me, which is this generation doesn't need help seeing things clearly. They see it very clearly. They understand exactly what their issues, worries, fears are. They just need a platform for us to listen to them, and then for us to do something about it, which I think has been very clear in the answers that they gave to you in the application and sort of in that first meeting. So maybe without getting into every detail of what came up, we had our first meeting. Sort of the purpose was to listen to what they wanted the structure of this group to look like. Maybe just touch on a few of the highlights for you out of that first meeting.
Yeah. So the first meeting, I think we had, obviously schedules are tough. I think we had 13, 14 of the athletes that joined us. And it starts off, it's Zoom, right? It's a Zoom meeting. I think the first thing I was most impressed with is they all turned their cameras on. And I'm laughing because I meet weekly with a lot of their coaches and their cameras aren't on. I'm like, you could teach your own coaches about, and they were on time. And like a couple of them who were going to be late, they emailed me and said, hey, I'm coming from practice. I'm coming from lessons. I'm like, okay, little things like that I think are already awesome. But it was, once we got into the conversation, I was just trying to facilitate. And I think the first question that really got them going is, what are some of the biggest challenges and difficulties that youth softball players are facing? And it was cool to watch them feed off each other. And I will say too, at the intros at the beginning was really fun to listen to. We have athletes from Texas, Iowa, California, New York, Wisconsin. I think there was a Georgia. We definitely had some accents in there too. But I think they enjoy, like, they play against each other quite a bit in the summer, or they get to follow each other through the Alliance. And so I think that was cool for them to also get to know each other a little bit on that level. Um, but man, when they started talking and just they know, like you said, they know what the issues are, and there was a lot about identity. There was a lot like of just not being a softball player. We, especially at this level, a lot of them, they're working out, they're taking lessons, they're training, they're practicing, they're on the summer, they're playing all the time. I thought that was pretty cool with some of them of already recognizing like I'm more than just a softball player, but how do we talk about that? How do we help other athletes? Obviously, the recruiting was a big topic of just, and not necessarily like how do I get recruited. It was more of like the anxiety, the mental, like the tough things that are going on as a teenager, while you're also trying to figure out what you're going to do going to college. I think that one of the coolest things was one of the girls, and you could just, again, these girls, you can tell they're going to be very successful off the field, later on after their softball careers. But one of them was like, "Hey, I have an idea. Can we do an actual in person meeting at the AFCS?" I'm like, "Well, yes, we definitely can. I love that idea." And that's what, not only did they show up, did they communicate really well, but they also like, had proactive ideas that they're ready to implement too. And that's what I was excited about. The girl who spoke up and had the idea, I text her coach. I'm like, just curious, where is she going to college? She's going to Harvard. I'm like, of course she is. I can tell.
Yeah.
Um,
I think it was powerful. I think the way you led the meeting was obviously to let them talk and sort of sort through their own thoughts together, and recruiting was definitely something they brought up a lot. And I it just happens. It's not everyone, because there's the Harvard athlete. There's an athlete from my team who's uncommitted right now. So it's not that everyone has the exact same path, but there were a lot of athletes on the call who are going to big names, who were recruited at the September 1st deadline. Like they had this and so at first, as they were talking about recruiting, it was very much centered around that path. And I wrote in my notebook, thinking about expanding the recruiting talk. And without either of us saying that,
yep.
as they went around, it went back to an athlete and she said, it seems like we're talking a lot about a very particular like recruiting journey. We should also make sure that we're talking to people that want to go Division 2 and Division 3, because people should go wherever it works. And it was just amazing, I think, to watch them sort through and be so self-aware to sort of, give their own feedback of what struggles have been for them, but also self-aware enough to realize their journey is specific to them and they should open their thought process through that. Something I think adults struggle to do often.
Yeah.
So I think it was pretty incredible to watch them just like work through those things. So from my standpoint, that was pretty awesome to watch.
I had the same thing written down, Krista, too. I was going to make a comment because they were talking about topics, because they also came up with the idea that they want to lead quarterly or maybe bi-monthly Zoom calls for athletes. So athletes inside the Alliance would actually join the call, and it would be led by these PAC members. And on topics September 1st, September 1st, September 1st, which is a big recruiting for the Division 1 level. And same thing, I was about to say it, and then they said it, and they took care of it. And actually, I'm the girl who said it. She's going Power 5, which I thought was awesome that she recognized too. Hey, there's a lot of other athletes out there. There's a lot of other rules, and we need to be inclusive and think about everybody. So I too, I thought that was one of the most powerful things that was said on there, and the realization that there's we have everything from 10-year-olds to 18-year-olds, and everybody's path is going to look a bit different. So what are the various things that they can help with? But I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. So the monthly or quarterly, I think they came up with Zoom calls for the other athletes. I thought was pretty incredible too, that they signed up to be a part of a leadership group. So we're talking about, some self-selected leaders, but I think it's pretty awesome to think about teenagers wanting to sit on a Zoom with people staring at them and sort of lead and listen. I think that was pretty exciting to hear that they wanted to do that. And I think what we know to be true, not only there are some issues with softball, but there are some issues bigger, and like isolation is such a thing right now. So I think the fact that all of them were like, we want to do an in-person thing, we want to see each other, we want to connect with each other, is not surprising, as something that just like there's needs some solution to. So I think that was pretty awesome for them to identify.
Yeah, I totally agree, and that's what I don't have kids, and I don't coach, so I'm not around teenagers very often anymore. I kind of live vicariously through our coaches or at our national events. I love it. It's like my favorite thing to be around our athletes in those events. So I wasn't quite sure, and I'm getting older now, so I'm getting a little bit more removed from from being a high schooler. So I wasn't sure how it was going to be received. Same thing. I had no idea how the applications, how the setting of the Zoom meeting. But man, they inspired me. They inspired me even more. And it's, part of me is like, dang, why didn't we do this at the beginning? But I don't think we would have been ready. So I think the timing is awesome, and I'm really excited for this group gets to be like our legacy group. And I think they're embracing that too, of like they get to set the foundation for how the player advisory committee is going to be run for the rest of this. So it's that was my thinking too. Like, when I was an athlete, I'm sure like many of us, right? We grew up as a youth player, and we were one of the top kids on the team. And I went through some struggles when I went to college, because it was the first time like I wasn't a starter. All the other freshmen around me were getting all the big awards, and it was a very humbling moment. But I was always like, academics were always my thing. And I think, we've recognized a lot of the achievements on the field inside the Alliance, but there's so much more to these athletes, whether it's academics, community service, leadership, and what are the stats out there on women-led companies or female CEOs? Majority of them played organized sports. And so, I'm kind of going on a tangent, but I'm just like so fired up at the leadership level and getting to like showcase these athletes that I have no idea what their stats are. I have no idea where these girls are even going to college. None of that was a part of the process. It's just more of leadership, and just some of the off the field stuff that they get to showcase and be such good examples for the rest of our youth players.
Yeah. I think I had shared this with you leading into the formation of the pack, but we had, after the JMU player took her life, a group of our athletes asked to have a session. They were struggling. I think at that point, with COVID and everything, there had been a lot of very public issues, mental health issues, and the athletes were seeing it. And so they asked us to put together something at S2. And so we had therapists sit on it. They didn't speak, but just because we felt, I think, nervous that we wouldn't be appropriately suited to answer if something came up or not handle it. We had pre-talks with the counselors to make sure that how we were having the conversation was appropriate. But really, we just asked open-ended questions of the athletes. What do you need? How are you feeling? And I think that was, it's not that I didn't know it. I mean, S2 is an athlete led organization, athlete driven. And so we have very close relationships with our athletes. I see them do incredible things every day. But that was one of the first times I was like, we need to listen to them more. Like they have the answers. And I think, a lot of the things they said were kind of similar to this theme, which is it's not that they don't know, they know a lot. It's that they feel like, yeah, but we don't have the resources for these things. Like we need XYZ, we need these things. Here's what we worry about. Everyone's saying mental health is important, but we're not doing anything about it. Like, how do we do this? So I think it feels like, things like PAC are steps for us to give them what they're asking for, which is some platforms to really, have some outlets and have some help and guidance and be able to like ask for what they need, and hopefully through resources. I think you and I both said at different times in the call, I felt like sometimes they were limited with what they were saying because they were like, yeah, but we can't get that. It's like, well, don't assume you can't get things. You're kind of sitting in a room with people who want to give you the things you're asking for. So I think it will feel very powerful if the things like when they say, can we do an in-person meeting at the championship, and you say yes, when those things start to happen, I think you're giving them access to feel powerful. And that's really important because I think they feel a lot of times like their power is being taken away.
Yeah. Do
For
you remember? I think I asked the question of why they wanted to be a part of it, or what first like attracted them to filling out the application, and I think it was Caden Henry who from Texas who said, I never actually thought about it, that I could have an impact on younger athletes and I could have a voice and influence, beyond just my team. And so that's where just having the platform and realizing it. And I do think, PAC was really, it wasn't just myself. It was, I did have the idea, but I tossed the idea out to a lot of former players who served in that role, they've played college softball, they've been on campus, they've gone through these things, and that validated the idea too, like, yes, this is important, this is super important to provide the platform, and that's really our role in this. You're right, like those young women, they had the answers, they have ideas, and as they get more and more comfortable, you could see it on the very first call, and I think we're going to see it on every single call after that, that as they get more comfortable, and we want them to ask, and okay, what resources, I try really, I try to think back to my years of playing, but shoot, it's been like 15 plus years now. But we do these member webinars, and I mean, I think they're good, but are they servicing the needs of the athlete today? And that's what this group gets to advise us on. Like, actually, we want to hear from this person on this topic because I'm struggling with this. They did bring up social media quite a bit, and that's something like you and I didn't have social media. I can't even imagine what they're going through now on top of everything else. And then you look at like at the college platform, let's go get people that are really going through it, and like let's get vulnerable too, right? And talk. It's a safe place. And then we challenge this group of the player advisory committee, go back to your teams, talk to them. And so I just think we're creating, facilitating hopefully this ongoing conversation that they can be talking to each other and then come back to this platform. And I asked them too, I'm like, are you guys okay presenting? Like, I would love for them to present to our board of directors. I would love for them to present to our commissioners, who are made up of organization heads, club coaches. Some of them might even be their own coaches. And there was no hesitation. They were, yes, they wanted to that because their voice and their message is going to be so much more powerful than like coming through myself or somebody else. So I'm just, yeah, I think the platform is all they needed. And I think they're going to take this and run with it, which is exactly, what we wanted.
Yeah. I think I said to you one time, imagine if every commissioners meeting, the PAC was like in the background and the adults knew it. And I think that there's something, very interesting about that. When we talk about, as I've mentioned, the problems with youth softball, it's not a specific softball issue. It's layered. It's really layered. It's access. It's it's all the way to social media and isolation, and there's a lot of layers to it. And so there's no one solution. And I think this idea that, you know, let's start to think about the decisions we're making, uh, the person we're making them for, is something that's like just a really good, just first step into sort of making sure we're framing the questions right, and we're not making assumptions about it. And in the same way that they don't have all the answers, and they're not the only stakeholders here either. So I think just starting to bring those groups together is uh, really incredible. So I'm excited about it.
Yeah, same. And you're right. Just sometimes their presence alone inside of meetings will at least make us think a little bit different because we make a lot of decisions on their behalf. And, myself included, right? I make a lot of decisions on the behalf of the athlete. So hearing from her directly, I know it's going to change. I hope for the better to, make sure that we are delivering on it exactly what we're aspiring to deliver on. And I think too, there's a lot of people that want to get involved too. I've had multiple adults reach out to me about the player advisory committee, and I think there's a lot of mentorship that can come out of this too. I'm excited to bring in speakers to showcase women that are doing great things, former softball players in all different industries, not just softball. But I'm hoping this becomes just this gigantic network of softball players from every generation, which is that was another one of the core things of why we put the alliance together is really to bring all the different generations together. And I think that pack will just help us a little bit more on that side.
Yeah, for sure. All right, I'm going to end it there because I feel like that was a good way to end. But thank you for coming on and talking about it. And I'm excited to see where these young athletes lead us.
Yeah, thanks for supporting the mission of the player advisory. Sometimes I have crazy ideas, and so I appreciate the people that not only say yeah, that's but also help execute it and implement it. So really excited about the future and what these young athletes lead us to.